And I'm super glad that also this year we have as a sponsor and partner eBay. And I'd love to call you to actually think together with me on something really incredible when it comes to describing the times we live in. I believe whenever we want to describe any of the assets recently, change and transformation are very essential words we always take into account. Whenever we talk about the new generation in education, not only in fashion but any other industry, it basically is essential to talk about the change and how everything transforms into a very new dimension. Today, we have a couple of really honorable guests who are experts in any of these educational disciplines, and I'm happy to share some of their insights together with you. So I would invite them to come and join me on stage now.
Thank you. Oh, shall we just? I think the names.
Thank you so
Okay.
much again, you guys, for
Thank you.
making the way to Berlin and enriching all of our audience with your definitely incredible perspectives. So I'd love to start with a very, very short round of introduction. So I'll start with you, Tamara.
I'm Tamara Gingic, and I run an organisation called Fashion Roundtable. Can everyone hear me? Because it's weird, I can hear myself through this. So,
We
yeah.
love the voice, so it's perfect.
And my name is Leroy van Halen. I'm a fashion designer based in Paris and a design educator at the Willem de Kooning Academy in Rotterdam.
Hi, I'm Jasmin Koppe. I'm a digital fashion designer and I also educate in the field at the university and further education programs.
Good afternoon. I'm Diana Marian Murek, and I'm the Director of Education of an Italian fashion school, Istituto Marangoni.
Incredible. Thank you so much for the short intro. I'd love to start with you, Diana, because basically you and within the educational institution you're heading, you take care of the whole programming. I'd love to know a tiny bit more about how do you usually make sure that all the programming and different courses within your universities cover what's basically happening currently in the industry, and you make sure to prepare everyone from the next gen of educations to be ready for what's expecting them.
Thank you, Julian. So we are, of course, super informed by the industry because we have industry in the school actually every week due to industry projects, mentorships, contests, talks, and so on. So we are in close contact with the industry, and so we are informed by them what is going on, what kind of skill set they are looking for in the future generation or actually right now, and therefore we can inform the employability of our students by reacting immediately in adjusting, implementing things to our courses, but also we inform the companies too and the brands and the industry because there are so many things that come also out of research because we are academics, so we do research also, and therefore we can also tell them in which direction things go. Because of course, as an educator, you more or less work in 1 or 3 years ahead, like fashion designers also, because you now have to now implement things that need to be there when the students, of course, graduate.
Wow. It has always been a very substantial part of your educational program within Marangoni to always have a very strong industry appeal and exchange with everyone. But how important is actually also the dialogue to actively listen to the students, what they demand, because I believe they are in a way also the best filter to reflect what exactly happens. How do you have that open dialogue and do you keep it and maintain it?
Well, I'm an educator since 20 years, so I have been through some generations actually now. So of course students change and go through cycles. So it's like one thing to have like millennials in the classroom, to have Gen Z in the classroom, and actually in 4 years we will have Gen Alpha in the classroom. So, and they are completely different. And yes, we react and we are in a conversation with them. But on the other hand, and actually even more than us, the companies are interested in their opinion because they look at them not only of somebody they educate, but also how to inform their strategies by, of course, this very, very important people in this age range. And so, yeah, it's very important to communicate with them, but sometimes also as an educator, you know also what's best for them.
Fair enough. I believe trust is a huge part of this. Mm, How do you feel the expectations of students on what to get out of the learning and out of the educational process have changed over the last couple of years? Do you see a very strong demand into a particular direction which you adapt and always include into your educational platforms?
Yeah, part of the industry is like evolving very often. We have seen maybe business of fashion when once you were reading only articles about fashion. Now we have articles, 30% of the articles about the beauty system. So, for example, we have implemented that into our curriculum and have now BAs and masters for fragrances and cosmetics, and further on, we really try to be as current as possible in an implicit and as explicit manner, and that means, I mean, when we talk about all the technology, I mean, only 2 years ago we were not teaching how to do AI prompts or how to work with Midjourney or Blender or Unreal. So also going in the direction of new technologies, we have to sometimes adapt super quickly.
Incredible. I really love that you're basically building a bridge through technology also into the future. And speaking about technology, I'd love to tap over to you, Yasmin, because obviously you are working at one of the very incremental intersections in the business and in the industry now, and defining a whole phygital landscape. So tell us something more about what you currently do and you are working on, and then I would love to also hear something more about the education processes you implement within the university.
Okay, right, thank you. I love that you both used the word bridge and phygital. Maybe to first explain, phygital, for those who haven't heard it before, means a physical digital approach. And that brings me to the term bridge, because that is what I'm all about in my work. I come from a traditional background in the fashion industry and then transitioned into fashion technology and work mainly as a digital creator now, work with 3D technology, and started also educating in this field. So I think there's a notion of the two segments being like, let's also true, being apart at the moment. So there's digital fashion and physical fashion, or the traditional industry, and I don't think that A is still true, and it's also not the way forward. So I'm really all about using my expertise in both fields to bring these sectors closer together and see also how they can, what the new technology can do to support existing workflows, production pipelines, etc. And what I do as a designer is quite varied. So it's also interesting for me to learn how brands are adopting this, how they're playing with it. Do they want to use it for visualization, for really nice new campaigns, replace lookbook shootings, or just test something new? Or also, do they want a rather functional use case of digital fashion items to maybe create a buzz or interest before they even pre-launch, before they might even go into physical sampling, show some details, which is really amazing, can be done 360 through the power of 3D, and or e-commerce. It's something I'm very interested in, taking it from 2D to 3D, virtual try-on solutions. I could go on and on, but I want to keep it short.
Well, I'm sure you can. It's definitely very interesting, and this is also another question which I probably would love to raise and also involve you to get included. Do you see that there's like more and more and more appetite and interest, not just towards the industry and from the industry, but also from the students towards exactly the disciplines you're teaching? Do you think that at the moment a lot of this curriculum is pretty much including these topics as an elective, or are there basically any chance for them to be one of the mandatory programs? How do you see this as someone basically believing this is definitely the future?
Yeah, obviously, I'm biased, but it's a very good question. The university where I teach, which is AMD, they completely overhauled their curriculum not too long ago, and realized the need to implement new topics, new subjects in their curriculum, which I find is really great. But I also know from other institutions who are maybe slower to adopt, are quite skeptical. I'm confronted with a lot of skepticism, anyways, in this field, which is natural and totally okay, and also so by the students. We always tend to think that Generation Gen Z, Generation Alpha, they are so tech-savvy and digital natives. However, what I encounter is that they're also overloaded and overwhelmed, and it can be scary, and it can feel scary to feel like, oh, can I keep up with it all? And then they also sometimes they want to go back to atelier style or maybe like couture style working, and really they don't fancy much coming into the class until they're being introduced to it, and then it's taking all this alienating effect away from it, and they see what can be done. And it's really great at the university where I teach that we also link it with their physical, classic design class.
Yeah.
So I want them to explore how they're using these technology, the softwares, to inform their design process, their research, the creation.
How would basically a project like this, which you start together with your students, probably be outlined? How would you start? How do you approach the topic?
So, I give them a crash course, just to what it means, what is digital product creation, what is virtual product development, how it's maybe some use cases, and then we dive into different softwares, and I let them play, I let them explore. I give them lots of tools, and then motivate them, and I show also again here how they can build connections, how they can use it to start their research, use AI in their research, or first sample virtually, do virtual fitting, digital fittings, and then go into the physical process, how they can drape even in 3D.
Oh wow, that is interesting. Like,
Yeah.
tell us more about that. I'm really excited to see basically any of these visuals. So I'll definitely look into your work definitely more, which I anyways know, but still in the work of your students. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
I'd love to involve definitely someone who has a perspective, bring it onto the table, which says that education definitely needs some support, sometimes not just from experts and educators themselves, but also from institutions and governments. And I'm really happy that you're basically here today with us, and you can maybe tell us something more about the business and how you always manage to involve governmental support and educate even them that education is incredibly essential when it comes to the change for the next generation of industry people we prepare.
So, what's your question?
Idea
Sorry.
to tell us how important the topic, the collaboration and role of governments.
Right. Thank you. So, I would say that I can't speak for Germany because I live in the UK, and 5 years ago today we officially left the EU. So my background's the fashion industry, but I, through a very myriad way, was working in the Houses of Parliament when we had decided to leave the EU. And the industry in the UK was very heavily Remain. And it wasn't really for anything other than business. It wasn't that ideological for us. It was just the numbers. And then working in Parliament, I remember sitting in the cafe at lunchtime, and I saw, where you'll see on Remembrance Sunday, you'll see where everybody goes and buy number 10 on that road down to Downing Street. A sea of blue suits, and you had the SPADs, that's the special advisors, who were in the young kind of high street cheap version of the same suit as the person that they were working with. And I was like, okay, they really don't understand. No, well, not even that. They don't get it. Having lived in fashion, I would say to someone, oh, do you remember, Tom Ford's first collection for Gucci? And they'd look at me like, no, of course I don't remember Tom Ford's first collection for Gucci. And I realized there was this whole other world out there. But that other world determines everything in your life. Everything. They set the rules that you have to live by or break the law to live by. So these people are really the people that you need to be working with if you're going to get anything done, because otherwise they're going to ignore you, because there are other industries who are very good at this. They spend a lot
probably
of
louder.
They spend a lot of money on it, and they get what they want. We saw that last week if you look at the Bro crew who were sitting for the inauguration, and the difference that we're going to see in our social media. And I would argue that social media has been the key cause of populism, not only here but in other countries, mine included. So it's interesting that they took the bait and they sat there for Trump's inauguration. So if governments are not informed, and they're very well informed about other industries, petrochemicals, for instance, automobiles, for instance, the third runway, which has been just approved by the government at Heathrow Airport, but they're not informed that maybe they don't need a third runway. Maybe what they need to do is bring back tax-free shopping, which would incentivize shoppers to come to the UK rather than shop in Paris or Milan. And we can now go there and spend our money and get 20% back. Thank you very much. Then maybe they will make decisions that arguably are not in line with what we need. So it's about not only education, as in big E education and education systems, which I'm also very heavily involved with and aware that it needs systemic change, but also that they need educating, because they will have studied politics, they would have been told, go to school, study politics, economics, maths, be very clever, rah. And then they're leaving a whole swathe of not only the skills that we all have at our fingertips as creatives, but also critical creative thinking. And I would argue, in a world of AI, those are going to be the skills that are going to survive.
Wow, fair point. Absolutely. You mentioned that it's very incremental to always have the governmental support. How do you make sure to have the first conversation? How is the first reach out happening? What would be like an ideal toolbox? Any organization or any person?
I think you have to make them uncomfortable.
Honestly,
Honestly, I think you have to make them uncomfortable. If you tell them, yes, 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 you're so right, you're not going to win the argument. If you're going to start off and say, this is not working, here's the data, that governments love data, so get a survey, do the data, drill into the data, share the data, get those voices to say why this isn't working, what we need to do, how we need the change. It's the same as running any campaign. That's the same as an advertising campaign or a social campaign, social justice campaign. I'd argue that they work on the same premise. So they're about taking an idea and making that idea that's been othered into something that becomes a central question. Because then by having a hiatus of people saying, no, you're wrong, then you might change things. But it's very challenging because, as I said, the other industries are very comfortable at lobbying, and I'd say the fashion industry isn't.
Wow. How did you achieve this with Fashion Roundtable? Exactly this what you're now doing, because obviously your organization is supporting more and more and more smaller or bigger businesses within reaching out to governments and actually including them into their support
Because
programs.
I felt it was morally wrong that that other people had more airtime. You know, the fashion industry doesn't do itself a service. We employ millions of people around the world. And actually the amount of policymakers who will tell me, my daughter wants to, or my son wants to study fashion design. Oh, really? Interesting. So where do you think their careers are going to go? How do you think that's going to look? What are you going to do for freelancers in this fragile economy? You know, how are you going to support businesses through budgets where maybe national insurance and tax is going to impact small businesses? Majority of the industry is small businesses, and yet we're being swamped by the multinationals. So how do you posit and hero people who I think have been systemically othered? You know, fashion, especially the creative part that I came from, it attracts people who have been othered. And that's its beauty. You know, we are the people that are thinking about identity, gender, race, size, engagement. You know, how do you take a linear business model into something that is, I would argue, beyond circularity towards regenerative? How do you, that's all very deep thinking stuff. And I'd say the fashion industry is very cognizant in that work. And it's light years ahead of others. But unless we're telling them and we're just speaking to ourselves, I'd argue it's meaningless. We have to bring those other people, those policymakers, into the room.
Wow, very educational,
Thank
definitely.
you.
And I believe all of us can definitely learn how to be a tiny bit louder when it comes to reaching
Be
out to
louder.
governmental institutions or when we need any kind of help or support. So thanks for that. Leroy, I'm super, super happy that you're here because
Thank you so
obviously
much.
I've been familiar with your work for quite some time now. You're yourself educated in fashion and
Yes.
now also shifted fields and basically educate yourself. So tell me, what do you believe are the most valuable things you've got educated and are happy to now adapt through the pulse of time into what you educate?
Well, I think also going back kind of to this idea of new skills. I was educated. I graduated myself quite some years ago now.
We couldn't tell, so
That's
don't worry.
2017. And I entered the industry, and I think that was super interesting, super insightful. But after a few years, like someone asked me a question like, "What is the last time you really actively learned something? What was the last time that you sat down to learn a new skill, learn new knowledge?" And I found it quite shocking for myself that I was stuck in my ways. And that really also made me go back to university. I did a master's more in design theory, and in the end of the day, I ended up in university. Because also I'm trained very classically, extremely classical, like hand drawing patterns, draping with calico,
Beautiful.
almost wearing white jackets. And I definitely see kind of this romantic view of the fashion industry. But I do think that we are, especially in fashion, we are romantics. We are very much the left side of the brain. But there's really a danger in thinking, like romanticizing the past. Also now I just come back from Paris Fashion Week, we also showcase my collection and the amount of corsets and jackets, like 19th century fashion items that were designed in a time when production and distribution was very differently, are still highly romanticized. But I mean, the industry has changed. We're no longer in kind of a crafts-based society. We are in a very kind of post-industrial society. So what I wished I had learned is that fashion is not only about this product or a set of aesthetics, that it is about preparing for continuous transition and really growing competences for young people in order to, well, facilitate these transitions and to be part of that. I now teach at an art academy, so it's very different than a design school. And for me, it's all about now what I'm doing is challenging aesthetics. Like what I do truly believe in that the medium is the message. And now with the rise of AI, of virtual reality, of digital prototyping, I'm quite optimistic that for the first time I really feel kind of the ground shifting under me. Things are fundamentally changing. Just like when I was younger, very young, internet came, and that definitely changed the way how, for example, we got inspiration. All of a sudden, like you in the past, you would go to a library, and it was very much like I lived on a farm, so there were like 3 books on art. So that was my inspiration, and then I remember, like all of a sudden, internet came and anything was possible. And now with the coming of AI, everything is possible. And I think that if I talk about my own education at a very traditional place, I was not prepared that I am learning a craft, but that in the upcoming, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years that I'm going to be active, that this craft would be continuously changing. And I think that's also where a lot of the fear comes from, because a lot of people don't know truly who they are. And if you manage to make a designer that has really a strong core, a strong set of competences and beliefs, so not a style or a signature piece or something, but really who is confident in what they do, that knows about for me, for example, it's all about gender exploration and the fact that I'm a farm boy who looks very unlike a farm boy, but I love, that lifestyle. That is the core. That is what, in the end of the day, is the only thing that's left. And throughout now, for example, this whole outfit, actually also the silhouette, the pattern, it's AI generated.
Wow.
I used
It looks incredible.
a kind of a diffusion model to figure out my own style by feeding my 12 years of design career into it,
Wow.
and it now pooping out designs that are more me than I could possibly do. It's better than me on a good day.
We're not sure.
So, but I think that is very important.
Incredible.
This kind
But
of
how do you make sure that basically this bridge is being built between the very artistic work your students are driven to explore and basically sliding them towards the ground by telling, hey, you know what? At some point, commerciality plays a role. How do you make sure they understand what's the point and what's the right amount of commercial impact they should include into their work?
I think it's really kind of a methodological shift. I don't think it's just for me personally. I think we really have to overhaul everything that we do and really start in the basics. For example, a program that I teach, or at least teach at our school, that it is really starting with kind of physical and digital, and really showcasing that within our society and also within the way that the world works, anything can both be done digitally and physically. But
How so? Do you see it the same way? I mean, basically, how do you feel about this, Diana? Because you've been educating and teaching yourself for like quite some long time, and basically now are responsible for the educational programs of the next gen people. Do you basically believe that all this physical aspect is still going to be incremental to fashion because we talk about a physical product and the emotion of it? Or do you believe that, just like Leroy was telling, anything could be replicated or built within a digital space?
I think, like everything throughout the history, will have its moment, see what will survive, and then adapt and so on. I think that my opinion is that fashion is a very romantic and actually nostalgia-based business. You see it also in not only haute couture, which would be like the most romantic one and most nostalgia one, but in general, like everybody thinks, you work in fashion, so it's like you always do like everything like 1 year or half a year ahead and so on. And I always think like, no, it's the most retro industry possible. Then we have all these developments, and I see, like, for example, I don't know which platforms or software you are using, but we work already since 10 years with Clo 3D.
Yes.
And we're exploring that, implementing new plugins, new, all the, of course, update that was there in the last 10 years. And when our students graduate from that, they actually are being taken by the fashion companies to train their people. Because the industry is actually
So
we
here
are
you
lucky
go.
because we are in academia and we can explore different ways and whatever in terms of what is happening out there, is there, and we can explore it. But it depends, because also some things die out. Then you have the hype of NFT. Then you have the hype of metaverse, and now it's ChatGPT, and then it will be the agents, and then so many things. So it's also like so many trial and error that, again, we can do because we're in academia, so we can try it out, and then we see what will survive. So I think, it will be very future phase, but it's not like really out there, a part of supply chain management and big data for retail and so on.
Yeah.
That is quite applied, I
Well-
think. But like the real digital innovation that Leroy is talking about, I have not seen that much of that in the industry yet. So we are actually leading the way, I think.
Speaking of education and digital consume, how do you basically, Yasmin, see the consume patterns of your students, or probably the next gen of people you educate, changing in a way?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Okay, let's narrow it down. When it comes to fashion, when it comes to their like fashion spending and their fashion consume, do you see them more driven towards own avatars and so on and so forth, or still being in love with experiencing fashion purely physically?
I think they're still very much in love with experiencing fashion and also the touch of materials, the physical part about it, and that's really important to where in the digital sphere, in this digital bubble, are not there to take anything away from people. I think it's this joy of materials is really is great, and I want to enhance that. I think with technology we can add levels that enhance these experiences. That we also maybe become aware of what we wear, of our
Great.
garments.
That's a great slogan. Here we go.
There you have it.
Copyright it.
That we, acknowledge it more and maybe also see the value of a piece of clothing, what went into it, the fiber that makes it. And if we add a digital layer, some experience, some way to travel through the garment, what have you, to that, maybe, that also has hopefully an effect on our consumer behavior. If we interact with a piece of clothing in a new way, in a different way, we get to know it differently, maybe also ourselves, we explore different personas and identities in virtual spaces where we feel safe maybe to try new styles, new looks, kind of what Leroy said earlier, like detached from trends or the thinking of following something, but maybe just what makes our style. And we can then bring that into the physical.
Tamara, do you have the feeling that a lot of the companies reaching out to you are somehow more invested or driven into a digital scape? Do you feel that governments are now more open towards them because technology is such a hype topic and basically takes over the world? Are governments more adaptive to support sort of similar initiatives involving high tech and technology in general?
I mean, actually, the businesses that are reaching out to us are largely, micro-sustainable businesses, and they're looking at regenerative practice. I really feel that the fibre sovereignty conversation, which I haven't heard as part of this, I've heard very much a focus on digital. I think there has to be a conjunction between the two. If you're not able to look at the world in the round in terms of the shocks that we're dealing with in terms of energy, in terms of food, in terms of climate, and fibre sovereignty and different processes and different economic models are solutions for that. So I'm not as invested in digital as this kind of catch-all solution as I am in regenerative practice. And a lot of the work that we're doing is around what we've framed the creative well-being economy, which centres creativity, health, well-being and fibre sovereignty in a more regenerative system that takes the lead from donut economics, takes the lead from circularity, takes the lead from all these other myriads, the kindness economy, the beautiful, whatever it is, economy into what we've called the creative well-being economy, because otherwise you're basically looking at a portion. Can this portion fix it? Are governments investing in AI and digital? 100%. But do they also need to look at the welfare of the land that we all live on? 100%. If we're in an energy and climate crisis, we all therefore have to look at what are we doing? And as educators, I would argue, we've just completed the Great British Wool Revival, which we did in conjunction with the King's Foundation and Newts Net-a-Porter. And that was really mapping what was a broken system of wool, which from medieval times to Georgian times was core to the UK economy, and then bringing that so that the farmers who now it's costing them more to shear the sheep than they make on the wool, which when I found that out was insane to me. And then how to map them with the mills, all of the systems, so that designers then can choose to use it, because otherwise we're being told merino is great and therefore we're importing, which adds to climate impact and also the welfare of the sheep in those territories in Australia and New Zealand. And the same's actually happening in Germany, because this is a project that I'm looking to do in Germany. So my researcher on the phone this morning asked me that if there are any academics, because there is a fund that we want to go in for, they're interested in this, come see me after. But back to it, why is that important? Because A, it keeps farmers, multi-generational farmers on their land. It keeps them invested and it supports local communities. The King's clip, which was grown, this was from sheep in Dumfries House in Scotland, was used for this Newts Net-a-Porter Modern Artisan project. The piece sold out in 2 days.
Wow.
Now, obviously, it had the word king attached to it, but ultimately it showed that there was a drive for heart-led thought pieces. So on consumption, my argument would be, if we go back to the values actually I've always had, because I always collected secondhand, of being morally and emotionally and financially invested in what you're buying. On my run this morning, the Zalando outlet store had a queue outside of it. The jacket's €8. This is an insanity. So until we get back to understanding that there's no way we can be buying something for €8 and everybody's been paid properly, then we're then
How do we make
we're
sure
out
people
of
know?
touch.
How do we make sure people know
We
about
have to be
this?
more honest about the slavery at the
Great
bottom of the
point.
supply chain. And we have to understand that fair wages means that we have to pay more. That's just how it is. And we have to buy less. So it's really challenging to get around that because we're all obsessed with it. We're all obsessed with getting a bargain. I love a bargain. But I want to know that the bargains come not at the exploitation of somebody out of sight and out of mind over there who's probably a child. You know, and I would argue that that has to be much more central to the conversation.
Incredible point.
Sorry.
Absolutely. That is also a very lovely wrap up. Basically.
I had a green tea before
no,
I
but
came on.
this is
Sorry.
absolutely incredible because I believe this is the message all of us as educators definitely need to bring out, be to whomever we teach or whoever we live around. So thank you so much again for joining
Sorry,
us
there was
today.
one thing
Oh,
I
yeah,
saw
sure.
you asked. I would advise that anybody teaching or anybody in education, they ask how they can learn to do profit and loss accounts. It bewilders me in the UK that they're studying creative jobs where many want to become their own business and they don't know how to do an invoice, they don't know how to deal with tax, they therefore don't know how much they're worth, and they're undervaluing themselves, which means they're going to go under in 2 years. So it's really cool to understand this is a business.
Absolutely.
Okay? And I think
So-
that was one thing I wanted to say when you sent me the list earlier. Get your teachers to ask if you can do a module on accounts. Really basic, but it will save your business in the long run.
Because we definitely sense it that basically the fashion business is getting more and more and more about the business. So running a business is definitely essential, and all of these educational parts and platforms can definitely be incremental to all of us and to all the people we teach. So thank you so much again for joining.
you.
And thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On y va?
There you go.